Hello and welcome back to today's Personal Finance Show here on Dublin City FM with me, Paul Merriman from askpaul.ie. Delighted to be joined in studio by Michael Broderick from FirstHomeScheme.ie. Michael, at the top of the show, first of all, you're very welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Paul. Nice to be back with you again.
At the top of the show, we went through a Q&A with first-time buyers that had sent us in questions in the studio. But also, I mentioned this week in the press, we've seen calls from different political parties, and particularly the political party Independent, about 100% mortgages being reintroduced into Ireland. So I know you've been in studios before, we've gone through the First Home Scheme before, but I thought it'd be a great opportunity to get you back in because I, for one, don't really want to go back to 100% mortgage. I think that's a really dangerous game to play, but I also don't think it's going to increase the supply in any way, shape or form. Agree?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Paul. Unfortunately, both you and I are old enough to remember what happened the last time that was introduced, so I don't think it's a good idea. While it might seem like a quick fix for a certain number of people out there, it has consequences, and I certainly wouldn't be something that I'd be hugely enthusiastic about.
Yeah, I wouldn't be advocating, but also I do think that, and why I wanted you in today was, I think a lot of first-time buyers, and a lot of politicians, to be fair, don't understand how the First Home Scheme works. They're afraid of the equity piece, and they still don't understand that you can use the Help to Buy scheme with the shared equity scheme, which is the First Home Scheme. So we might try and do is, I know we did this before, we did it really well, but let's try and break it down again for our listeners today, because I find that the whole idea we have the Personal Finance Show is to try and, we do a section after you today, actually we do Fact or Fiction, where we go on social media and we look at loads of different content from around from Europe and America as well, and we try and tell listeners whether it's fact or fiction. There's so much misinformation out there. But even looking closer to home, when you see politicians calling for certain things and you don't see them explaining what's available, and almost, I'm probably going to have to say, almost kind of scaremongering or trying to go the populist view of let's bring 100% mortgage and get those renters. And of course, if you're renting and you're under pressure and you know you're trying to get the property ladder, this might sound great to you, but I think it's up to politicians to safeguard from this from happening. So let's run through First Home Scheme fairly quickly. Let's just say what the First Home Scheme is first, and we can get into that, and then we go from there.
Great, thanks, Paul. And you're absolutely correct, and I agree 100% with everything you've said there, because there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lack of information out there, and with the help of people like yourself, it's great to have an opportunity to get on record the real facts, the real story, and what actually is available. Because there is a notion, and I meet people all the time, first-time buyers, people who are out there, who don't realise the various schemes that are available to them. And I know there's been a lot of discussion even in the last week in media in general about how long it takes to save a deposit. And yes, it can take a long time to save a deposit, but the reality is you don't have to do all of the work yourself, because what I mean by that is that you don't have to have all of the deposit to actually buy a home. There are ways and there are means and there are schemes there to assist you in doing that. So back to your original question, what is the First Home Scheme? The First Home Scheme is a scheme that actually assists first-time buyers and those in certain other categories to purchase a home by plugging a gap or bridging a gap between their mortgage, their deposit and the price of a home. And there are other ways also of people raising a deposit, because I know that's clearly the first obstacle for people. So there is the Help to Buy scheme, which is different from ours, but works really well with the First Home Scheme. So it's making people aware of the various options and schemes that are out there to help them.
So let's maybe break down, and why don't we start with the Help to Buy, then, to be fair, because the Help to Buy, you're right, the deposit is required in all cases, because you can't get a 100% mortgage, and we don't want to go back there. So typically speaking, you need a 90% deposit. You can have more if you want, but for to get on the ladder, you need 10% deposit. 10% deposit, 90% mortgage. So with 10% deposit, with the Help to Buy, you're going to get up to €30,000 if you've paid enough income tax and door tax over the last 4 years.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that's number one. So that's 30k of tax you've paid back in your back pocket, and you get 30k. The one issue most people have with this is that it's capped at €500,000 as an purchase price. That's not your department, that's the Help to Buy department, that's the revenue. So it is capped today to buy a house, a brand new house, for 500,000. And I think the problem is most people in Dublin find it very difficult to find anything that's new for 500k. But this is supposed to cover the 26 counties. It's not just supposed to cover Dublin. So you look at the 26 counties, you can still buy new homes under 500,000 and qualify. So for listeners, if you're looking for a 400,000 house as a brand new property or self-built, you can then get 30,000, and now you only have to bridge the gap at 10,000. So you have your 30,000 from the Help to Buy and 10,000 in your back pocket. And you're in. Exactly. If you think you're 4 foot on the ladder and that you have your deposit sorted. Or you can save and not get the first home scheme, or the Help to Buy. You can just save the 40k, but it's a massive lump sum for people to save. And then, let's say you go for the mortgage, and the mortgage only comes in at, let's say, €300,000, but the house is €400,000. So you've got 340,000, your deposit of 40k, and you've got your 300,000 from the bank, and you're short 60k in that example. This is where you guys pop in.
Exactly. Yeah. We can come in there and we can actually provide up to 20% of the value of the property in the form of an equity slice. So exactly as you say, you have your mortgage, you have your deposit, but you're still short. And if you're short up to a maximum of 20% with the Help to Buy scheme, we can plug that gap. We can actually give you 30% if for
you're
some
not
reason
using the first,
you're not using the Help to Buy or you don't qualify.
And that's really good for those that might be coming back from Australia or America and they're coming back to Ireland and they haven't paid the taxes for the 4 years, they don't qualify.
Exactly.
And yeah, I suppose they don't have to pay either back either. So it doesn't really make a difference whether it comes from the Help to Buy or the First Home Scheme. As in the Help to Buy didn't have to pay back. With the First Home Scheme, we get into that now in a second, they pay back eventually.
Yes.
But there's no major rush to pay
No,
back.
and it's at a time of your choosing. So it's not like your mortgage. People often say it's another mortgage. It's not really, because it's quite different to a mortgage.
Oh yeah, it's not another mortgage. Yeah,
it's quite different. So exactly to your point, you can pay it back whenever suits you. You pay back in your own time. And it's up to you how you pay it. You can pay it in one lump sum or you can pay it in multiple sums over a number of different years.
Or equally, you don't really have to pay back. So if you pass away, then you pay it back. Or if you sell the property in X amount of years, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, then you pay it back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in theory, you could live in the home for the entirety of your life and not pay a penny. Now, there is a service charge. So people again ask, is there interest? Theoretically not, but there is what we call a service charge, which kicks in after year 5. And that starts at 1.75%. So it's a fairly low charge. But the good thing again about it, unlike a mortgage, you can actually roll that up on a simple interest basis.
Yeah, it's not going to compound. Yeah,
exactly. It's non-compounding. So back to your point, you can actually live in the home for the entirety of your life, pass away, and then your estate will have to repay it at that point in time, including any outstanding service charges. But now, and our hope is that people will repay it, during their lifetime. But the reality is, you could stay in your house the entirety of your life and not pay a penny.
I think, again, I remember when the First Home Scheme was released, opposition parties saying it was another mortgage and putting news around first-time buyers. There's a lot of misinformation out there for political scoring, which I just hate. From a financial planning point of view, if something good comes out, it's supposed to try and keep it easy for the client and making sure the client understands what they have option-wise. Yeah. But if you look at what this covers, in my opinion, you've covered the first-time buyer, person that maybe has 10% deposit or using Help to Buy. Yeah. You're also covering people that are coming back from the country that haven't worked for, maybe the last 4 years. They claim the Help to Buy, they get more, they get 30% versus 20%.
Exactly.
But also, we have the fresh starters now, which is brilliant as well. So can you bring listeners through the self-starters, or the new starters, or fresh starters?
Yeah. Yeah.
Call them everything but fresh starters.
Yeah, and this is a game changer for people who fall into this category. So what is a fresh start? So fresh starters, basically anybody who has been in a relationship, has previously owned a property or part ownership in a property. Mm-hmm. That relationship, for whatever reason, unfortunately no longer exists, and they've gone their separate ways, and that person no longer has an interest in what would have been originally the family home. And if that is the case, then you qualify to use the First Home Scheme the same as if you're a first-time buyer. It also applies to anybody who's gone through a bankruptcy process. So if you've been through a bankruptcy process and declared bankrupt, you can also use it. And what it does is it enables people who probably are in the middle of their life cycle, in their maybe 40s, 50s, whatever it might be, who have given up hope of actually ever being able to purchase a property again because they've a much shorter working life remaining. So it's a game changer to those people. And while it's a small enough cohort of our business, for the people that it actually impacts, it
makes
really
a massive difference.
A huge difference.
But especially because some of these people might have kids, they might not be able to, they're not going to get a deposit together by the time they're looking after the kids, and maybe new rent and the properties. I often find when clients come to us that the properties aren't suitable for where they're living, to see the kids, etc. So I think it is a massive game changer, to be fair, as well, for those fresh starters coming in. Let's talk about what people need to qualify then. So if you're thinking of going to be a first-time buyer, what is the process, or a fresh starter? So is the process deposit, mortgage, then you guys, or just bring people through that process and what they need? Yeah,
so again, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and our scheme is often referred to as the government scheme. While certainly, the government, to be fair to them, were the ones behind setting it up on that, the fact of the matter is we're actually a private company. We're not actually a state agency. So that, the reason I say that is people suddenly hear government and they just think red tape and bureaucracy and forms and form filling and so forth. So we have a very different approach in terms of how all of our application is done online. It takes about 40 minutes. you upload your approval in principle. You must have an approval in principle from your bank. You upload that, and that kicks the process off. Once you make your full application, which, as I say, will take about 40 minutes online, you will receive an approval from us within 2 to 3 days. And the reason we can do that is that we don't ask you what your salary is. We don't care. We don't ask you what your
the approval in principle, the bank's done
Correct.
their job.
The banks, and we work in tandem. So I suppose to avail of the First Home Scheme, it is clear, to be clear, you must get your mortgage from either AIB, Bank of Ireland, EBS, Haven or PTSB. So if you get your mortgage from any of those banks, you automatically qualify for the First Home Scheme once you qualify as a first-time buyer or for a starter. So we don't need to know your salary, your credit history. The banks have done all of that, and we have an arrangement with the banks. If they qualify you and issue with an approval in principle, that's good enough for us. So that's why we can issue you an approval in 2 to 3 days.
Right, great, okay. And then just say, for argument's sake, for people going outside those banks, are those banks going to be expanded past those banks that you existingly have, like maybe over the likes of Avant, right, a new kind of new money, the new kind of players in town, or what does that look like for expansion? Yeah,
so the scheme is open to every authorised lender in the country to join the scheme. So, and we're actually out there speaking with various other lenders, and you mentioned some of them there, and we're talking to them all of the time with a view to trying to encourage them to come into our scheme. I suppose there is a small cost for them to get in, so that's why, you know, it's not automatic that they all join. But certainly, I think as the scheme becomes more relevant and more people use it, you know, there will come a time probably when most lenders, if not all. I mean, my hope would be there'll be someday will come when all lenders will actually. I think in the country will
I think it'd be great if all lenders. Okay, let's move on to I mentioned the ceilings here for the likes of the Help to Buy, which is the €500,000. And if you do look at the major cities and how house prices have gone through over the last, I suppose, particular 10 years, or even the last 5 years, it's the price caps that are really kind of hurting people. How do they get reviewed? Because although you're a private, you know, it's a private company, it's not a government agency, you obviously don't want to increase the limits because that will fuel, you know,
house price inflation,
and then also hurt the supply. So while the supply is bad, I presume that this has to be capped in a controlled manner. And if we had loads of supply, this would be able to be increased because it wouldn't be any government department as the Help to Buy or you guys creating the house price inflation. So you just bring people through that, because I think there's a lot of frustration out there for first-time buyers, and when they're looking at these schemes and then they go try and find a property, they can't find a property that fits into the scheme. That's probably the biggest issue in major cities, in particular Dublin. So why are the ceilings there? Maybe educate everybody on that. And will they change? How do they get reviewed? And is it your company, not your department, your company, or is it the government departments that influence that decision?
Yeah, look, all really good questions. So first and foremost, the reason the price ceilings are there, there was a similar scheme run in the UK about a decade ago, and they didn't have any price ceilings in place. What happened was it was proven that it contributed hugely to house price inflation. So, you know, that's not in the interest of the home purchasers that we actually go out and it might get somebody on the housing ladder, but the person coming behind them might have to pay an extra 10, 20k if we didn't have some ceilings. So that's why there are ceilings in place in the first instance. It's not that we're trying to discourage business, far from it. We want to encourage people to use the scheme. But I suppose what our optimum is, we're trying to get a fine line between having the price ceilings at a level that allows people to use the scheme, but yet not at a point where it's contributing to house price inflation. Now, that's, you know, you might say that's a never-ending task to try and strive for that. Will we ever get it 100% right? Probably not.
No, I think it's nearly impossible.
It's impossible. But what we do is we try all the time. And the way we try is we do review the price ceilings twice a year. So it's not like, excuse me, not like they're put in place and then they're left for 5 years. We review them twice annually. So we keep a very close eye on the market. We keep a very close eye on where prices are going. So we review them twice annually, and ultimately it's our board who will sign off on revised price ceilings. But on that board we have people from the banks and the state and so forth. So we are going through a price ceiling review at the moment. I am very aware right now we've probably fallen behind in a number of counties because there was such inflation last year, and we were really cognizant of it and we had to be very careful. But we are in the middle, as I say, of a price ceiling review now. The results of that will be on our website in the first week in July. Excellent. So if people are struggling at the moment with a price ceiling in their local authority area, have a look at the website again in July is what I would say, and hopefully you will find that there's been a change in your local authority area and it now enables you to go out and purchase perhaps the house that you wanted to buy or the apartment that you wanted to buy.
Okay, brilliant. Lastly, Michael, there's some situations where if a landlord is selling the property and the tenants are in for second-time buyers, that there's some government supports there. Is there any chance of the scheme going into the second-hand property market in the future, especially for those type of situations? Because although I disagree with the 100% mortgages, I do think that, I'm sorry, just your opinion. I do think that if you're renting, you've been renting for 5 years and your rent is, typically speaking, the average or the median is now over, it's €2,000 a month. So if you're renting for the last 5 years of a landlord selling the property, would it be an idea, what would you think, this is my brainwave I suppose, would it be an idea for the landlord to get the CGT relief to be able to give a 10% discount on the property purchase to the client or the tenant, and then the tenant would then only have a 90% mortgage, because the property, they got the discount on the property. And would you ever see a case where, again, if there was a mortgage allowed, could the First Home Scheme come in and support that type of applicant, even though it's a second-hand property? Because I think that a lot of the issues come when somebody sells a property, and it tends to be either, especially in Dublin, the first-time buyers competing with, probably another landlord coming in trying to buy that property and trying to get on the property ladder as well. So there's a lot of competition where we could probably protect the tenant a little bit more if something happened. I know it's not your department, obviously, but what would your thoughts be?
We do have a product there at the moment. Again, it's not widely, I suppose people are not widely aware of it, but there is a product there that we call a tenant home purchase. So if you're a tenant in an apartment or a home, and your landlord issues you with a notice of termination, and that's an official form of the RTB, basically because, and the rationale for their termination is that they're selling the property. You can actually avail of the First Home Scheme in those circumstances to plug your gap that you may have and actually buy that property. Now, the one caveat is that it is subject to the same price ceilings.
Yes.
And that catches, and you have to be a first-time buyer.
Okay.
But you can use it in that
case.
But
you need a deposit.
You do need a deposit, and unfortunately, you're correct. You can't use the help to buy because it's a second-hand property.
Yeah, I think that's the. Sorry, I know the tenant home purchase is really good. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the gap. I think it's the discount for maybe the discount on CGT maybe for the landlord or sell them and encourage the landlord to sell, have CGT relief, and then be able to pass a discount or a discounted valuation onto the tenant. I just think we need to get a little bit more. Sorry, this is not your department, I know, so this is not a due. I think we just need to get a little bit more creative in relation to where we're seeing, innovative as well, and where we're seeing those pockets of homelessness come from, or people under real duress. So, and I'm hoping I'm not going to annoy anybody by saying this, but duress is not still living in your parents' house. It's not ideal, but you're somewhere to live. But when you get that eviction notice and someone saying you're gone because I'm selling the house, I think that's when, especially if someone has children, that's that part I feel that we're probably failing a lot more society-wise. So it'd be great to see that the home purchase scheme linking in maybe with the Help the Boy, or linking in that situation to try and help those people. Okay, brilliant. In relation to next steps for you guys, what are the numbers like? How many have you done? What are you hoping to achieve this year? What's the take-up been?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, our take-up is really been great, and we've been effectively doubling year on year over the last we're almost 3 years up and running at this point. So we've just over 3,500 facilities issued. We have about 7,500 approvals out there, and look, as you know yourself, there's always a lag between person getting an approval and actually finding a house. So there are people at exactly the point. There are people at various stages in the buying cycle. So somebody might literally have a house and they literally just want to get all of their ducks in a row and then literally go off and put down a deposit. Others may be only starting the process, and it could be 12 months before they even find the house that they want. So that's why you'll always have, roughly double the amount of approvals out there that you have in terms of drawdowns.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's going really well from our perspective. And like we and somebody recently asked me, said, how many can you do? My answer back is we can do as many as is out there, because there are three constraints from our perspective. There's the capital funding, which we have, but we've just made an announcement last week that we've just got an additional 60 million and we got an extension of 2 years. So the scheme is guaranteed now until the 1st of June 2027. Brilliant. And we have 740 million in the fund in total now. So it's quite a sizable chunk of money.
That's a phenomenal size of money. Yeah,
it is, yeah. So we're good on funding, we're good on time. The only other two factors then we have is supply.
Yes,
and as you correctly said there at the outset, Paul, part of our remit is to encourage builders, developers to go out there and deliver. And that's a lot of the job that we do on a daily basis. We go talk to builders, developers, and we basically point out to them that, look, if you build the right product, if you build your first-time buyer, 3-bedroom, semi-detached type product, we have people there who are pre-funded, ready to go. They'll have talked to people like yourself about a mortgage. They'll have talked to us about the First Home Scheme, and they're ready. So there's a lot of people out there who are ready to go but they just need to find the right product. So if the product is delivered, they would be able. And then from our perspective, and this is on us, the last bit of the equation there is the price ceilings. We need to make sure that the price ceilings stay in tandem or in pace with the market, and that's something we've got in mind.
I think the price ceilings, and ours might be harsh to people, I think they're great because automatically there's going to cause inflation. If you go to a builder and say you can now buy, you're basically saying to the builder you can now charge 550 or 600k. What the builder is just going to charge 550 or 600k. I think you're right. I think you made a very honest point here, Ron. You're never going to get 100% right because it's a very difficult thing to try and do from an economic point of view and a supply point of view of builders. It's not as simple as, and I think the problem for first-time buyers is that it's quite an emotional time for them. They're trying to find the property and they know they can pay the extra 10, 20k back, but there's a knock-on of that 20k for them, as you mentioned, rolling right the way through, and then everything becomes 20k more expensive when you get this massive inflation.
It's like your 100% mortgages. It's the same impact. It might get, it'll get a few people on the property ladder, but is it going to do the greater good? Any good?
It won't do any good because there's no supply. I think that's the major issue, and even ourselves, we have hundreds of applications out there on our desks with people that are approved for mortgage, but they just can't find properties. And they're people that are in the first home scheme, or they have the help to buy, or they've got their own money as in deposits together, and they still can't find properties. If 100% mortgages tomorrow will do nothing, we'll have more applications, but no more people getting houses.
And there's been a lot of discussion around the First Home Scheme doing second-hand properties as well, and that's something that we have looked at. And again, it's a real concern of ours is that you're still talking about the same number of homes available. All you're doing is you're increasing the level of demand by a factor of 3, 4, or potentially 5. So you now have people outbidding each other or trying to bid against each other because of the way a second-hand property is being sold, and they all have an extra 50 or 60k from the First Home Scheme. So all they're doing is they're actually putting the price of that property up, and there's still only one home available. So only 1 out of the 10 people who are bidding for it are going to get it. So that's the challenge with opening the scheme to the second-hand property. It's something we'll continue to look at and continue to monitor, but right now it's probably a challenge in that context.
Michael, before you go, can I ask you a question in relation to blue sky thinking? What do you think solves it? So for first-time buyers listening, or parents listening that have people still living in the house that are in their 30s or maybe even 40s at this stage, is it just, I think it's just supply, but if you wake up tomorrow and we have an extra, I don't even think 60,000 houses is going to do it, by the way, but if you did have 60,000 or 100,000 extra houses over the next 18 months, say, does that make the scheme more successful? Because obviously you can lend to more people, you can help more people get on the property ladder, you can bridge that gap for more people. Inflation comes out of it because, there's enough supply. The only people that would probably hurt then is builders that are building, they can't shift the properties quickly. So what would a blue sky look like for the Irish property market?
Well, look, you and I again have been around long enough to know that there's no one solution to the problem. I mean, it's multiple, and if you had an abundance of supply, I guarantee you there'd be some other problem. So it never fails to amaze me. The simplicity of some of the reporting and some of the commentary that goes on in terms of everyone has a solution, everyone knows what the problem is, but yet we have this bigger problem here, and there's lots of great people working in the sector. Look, there's a lot of joined up thinking that needs to happen. I think there is an acknowledgement there now that does need to happen, and there are efforts taking place to actually try and resolve and address it. But one of the things I would say is, and this is based on meeting lots and lots of people around the country, young people who are trying to buy, and believe it or not, there are a lot of parents out there as well, and they're trying to get John and Mary out of the house, and they'll come up and they'll be quite, they won't beat around the bush on it, they'll be quite blunt and say, look, I have my 35-year-old living at home, I need to get them out, for everybody's sake. And look, we all can understand that. And but like what I'd say is there isn't an ideal solution for every problem out there, and supply is a big one, as you indicated, Paul. But there are helps out there in terms of schemes, etc., that we've just talked about. So there is information. People need to just start looking, start searching, because like a lot of people, I'm constantly amazed at the number of people we meet at events who haven't even heard of the Help to Buy scheme.
I know.
It's one thing not knowing about our scheme, it's only around 3 years, but Help to Buy has been around now for 7-8 years?
I know.
And people still are unaware of it. So unfortunately there's a lot of media, I would say social media, theme out there that, this is an awful country, you can't buy a house. Well, it's not, and you can. But it's not easy and never has been easy. But
it has never been easy.
No, it has never been easy. But and I do have huge sympathy, and I've kids in that category now, so I'm no different to an awful lot of people out there. But what I'd say is, get out, get up and start looking around and go and see and talk to people like yourself or others, and see what options are available to you, because there are options there that people are not aware of.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. I think I started to stop at this segment by saying, you know, this week we've seen politicians calling for 100% mortgages in opposition parties, and like that's, to me, is mental. Like that's the pressure obviously going to pick up on that, you know. So I do think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I always say this when it comes to personal finance: look after your own house, get really, really qualified advice that suits you. Speak to someone that knows your figures, what you can qualify, what all the schemes are. And that's the best. So don't be looking at social media, don't be looking at the media, and try and stay away from negativity, and be able to see what you can do for you. I mean, and sometimes in a financial plan as well, it might be a case where you're saying, right, it's not for you today, but yes, in 2 or 3 years' time, this is where you're going to be, or this is what you need to do, whether it's clean up your credit report, whether it's to save more, whether it's increase in salary, whatever the tools are, at least you know, rather than sitting and thinking, I'm never going to get a property, I can't get a property. At least if you invest in a financial planning piece and be able to find out what I can do today, tomorrow, 2, 5 years' time, at least it's a plan. I think it's a lack of planning that gets people frustrated.
No, completely. And even exactly the point there you made, even if you're 5 years off buying a house, come and talk to someone who will be able to put exactly that, a plan in place for you. And you'd be amazed. You might come away surprised, having not realised what's available to you, and also not realise that actually there is a way, there is a plan, there is a path forward in it. Because I can understand why people get utterly frustrated and just want to go to the airport and immigrate or whatever. You know, if you were to listen to all the negativity that's out there, and there's a lot of negativity.
There's a lot of negativity.
You know, so yeah, if you're taking that in all the time, I can absolutely understand why you only see one option, and that's to head to the airport. Yeah,
I can understand that too. Michael, thanks a million for joining us in the studio today. A pleasure as always, and thanks for the update.
You're very welcome, Paul. Thank you very much.